Welcome to the Seattle Investors Club podcast with Julie Clark and Joe Bauer, where we share the nuts and bolts of real estate investing from our 20-plus years in the industry. Sit back, relax, listen, and immediately take action. Are you ready? Here we go.
Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Real Estate Investing podcast. My name is Joe Bauer, and I'm here with my lovely co-host, Julie Clark. Julie, how are you doing today?
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Joe. I feel so lovely. Thank you. I got an adjective today. Woo-woo. Actually, I am doing lovely today. But I was just telling my friends here, Joe and Richard, that I was up until like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Partying.
And I'll tell you that I'm going to say in code to my friends that are listening that kept me up that late, Woody and Daniel, I'm hurting today because of you guys. So thank you. So I'm going to do my best here today to give you guys the goods, but you will forgive me. You forgive me if I mess things up. So that's me, Joe. Let's focus on you today. What are you doing? Where are you at?
I am hanging out in beautiful southern Utah, a place called Kanab, which is outside of where we're going to go hiking the Wave tomorrow. And it is, let me step back. I had forgotten how beautiful southern Utah was. This place is just like a different kind of universe down here with all the red rocks and amazing like lakes and rivers. It is so awesome down here.
You know what? I can tell in your voice how awesome it is. You got a little pep in your step today, my brother. So something's going good down in southern Utah, right? So what's
that's probably the 20-minute workout I just got done doing in the park outside the library.
Okay,
it was
epic, right? Awesome. That's that ain't going to be happening for me anytime soon. But I want to know what the Wave is. What the heck is the Wave?
So anybody that's doesn't know what the Wave is, you should do a quick Google search for it. It looks like a wave made out of rock and like red, orange, yellow rock. The cool thing about it is they only let 20 people in a day, and I lucked out and my first try got the permit, and I know people that have tried to get it for years and not got the permit. So
wow.
I'm excited.
You might want to buy a lottery ticket or something.
You're not the first person that said that to me since I've told them the story. I need to go do that.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Here's the transition. Yeah. We hit the lottery today, everybody.
What?
Yeah. What? We have Richard Symmes with Symmes Law Group with us today. And we are going to be talking about bankruptcy and foreclosure, a little bit of probate. Of course, and layer that in on the real estate. So Richard, we won't tell everybody your nickname yet. Richard, what's going on?
Hey guys, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So these guys, we just talked about it here offline before we brought in our friends here in podcast land. But, Richard is a local attorney, Symmes Law Group, like I said, downtown on 4th Ave. Areas of practice: bankruptcy, foreclosure defense, probate, real estate, some business law. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah.
On there. But the funny thing is how I came to sort of, we'll say, know Richard a little bit is that I had a regular brokerage transaction that my client was considering doing seller financing on, but he was worried about the foreclosure process, or that he might have to foreclose, and he didn't want to go through that. And he, so as part of the process, I said, well, let's have a conference call and talk to a foreclosure attorney. And when I was calling around, or somebody actually referred me to Richard, I called him up and I'm like, hey, Richard, this is Julie Clark with HomeLink, which is the brokerage firm that I am at currently as of this day. And Richard's like, oh, hey, Julie, I know who you are. And I'm thinking, oh, shit. Why does Richard, I'm calling foreclosure attorney, know who I am? I'm in trouble for something. And he, which was awesome, said, I recognize your voice from the podcast, and you said your name, and I put two and two together. So that was a hilarious moment for me. I went from completely sweating it to feeling pretty good that Richard actually knew who I was, I think, right at the moment. But that's how we got to know each other. And he did an awesome job helping us in our transaction, a transaction that actually turned into 3 deals for me, not just one. I'll tell you guys about that at another time, but that's how we were introduced. So I told him that day, do you remember, Richard, that day I said, when we get through this transaction, you got to come on the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really happy to be here. And you guys make for great listening on my bus ride into the city every week.
Sweetness. So do you have a real estate license yourself? I'm just curious.
Actually, funny you should ask. I actually passed the managing brokers exam a couple weeks ago.
Ooh.
I decided to go ahead and just do that. As an attorney, if you have experience in real estate, they essentially said I had to take 60 hours of coursework and take, I think it's called the C exam.
Okay.
And so they give you one shot. And so luckily I passed. And so I'm just waiting for my license in the mail at this point.
Well, guess what? I need to have a separate conversation with you after this, but congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, very exciting. Well, I'll let Joe kick us off then beyond that. Go for it, Joseph.
Yeah. So, Richard, the first question is always about getting to know our guests. So I'd love it if you could step back and take us through how and where you grew up and how that led you to where you are today in the real estate business or in your real estate lifestyle.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Bellevue. And so after that, I went to the University of Washington. Go Dogs. And
go Cougs.
No. And I double majored in economics and communications. And while I was there, I was actually working for the Sonics, the basketball team, in guest relations. And I wanted to go to law school, but I wanted to work in some sort of sports and entertainment capacity, mainly sports. And so I noticed a lot of people in sports had, at the higher levels, had law degrees, and that went for agents as well. So I've always been interested in the more transactional aspects in business and law. And so at that point, I was lucky enough to get into the University of Denver. And so there, I actually did end up working for a sports agent, had a bunch of internships in estate planning, real estate, and I graduated there in about 2008. And unfortunately, the sports agent didn't want to pay me for the work that I was doing while working for him, so I had to go out into the real world.
Did you yell at him and say, "Show me the money"? When he said he wasn't going to pay you?
Exactly. I mean, they're doing millions of dollars of deals, but no, he'll just get the next guy up, But so it's time to get a real job. And so the first job out I got was actually working with a smaller law firm, and they represented real estate agents in their errors and omissions insurance. So essentially defending real estate brokers on behalf of the insurance company. And from there, I worked there for a couple months, but it was right after the crash in real estate. And so being the youngest attorney, I was laid off. And so this was all in Denver. And then I networked and was able to get in touch with somebody who was doing bankruptcy. And so I had never taken a bankruptcy class. I didn't really know anything about it. And this is all after I graduated. And so there, I was working with a solo practitioner, and he just helping him out, whatever he needed. I was just kind of hanging out at the office, and eventually, he started to pay me, and then I was kind of bringing my own clients at the same time. And so I worked there for about a year and a half, I would say. And then eventually, being from the Seattle area, I just threw up a website focusing on bankruptcy, and people started to call me, and I was still living in Denver. but eventually, the calls were pretty consistent. So I just packed up the car and headed to Seattle. And that was about end of 2010. And so I've been working at my own firm, Symmes Law Group, ever since then. So it's been pretty good to work for yourself rather than a firm. But over the years, things have, at the start of it, bankruptcy, it was the most filings ever, 2008 through maybe 2010. And so, back in Denver, we were filing, just two of us, over 20 cases a month.
Wow.
And so from there, bankruptcy kind of goes along with other practice areas. It could be debt settlement, loan modification, so things just kind of evolved as I started my own practice. And so that started to incorporate business aspects, trust and estate, probate, and, real estate. So that's where we are today.
Wow, that is awesome. That's a good path there. I love it how you threw up a website in Seattle while you were in Denver, got enough business, and then I wish everybody could have something like that, and then moved once it was working well, right?
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast on, internet marketing and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Hey, we're always looking for topics. So
yeah,
we'll tap on your shoulder for that one. Curious, like these days, right? So you were at, 2010, lots of bankruptcy happening, right? Towards the 2008, 2010, like you said. What is today's thing, right? What's happening the most today in your practice? What area? Is it foreclosure or bankruptcy still, or what are the problems of the world today, Richard?
Well, from my perspective, things were kind of slow at the end of last year, and they seem to really uptick, at least for me, in the bankruptcy area, February, March, April. But those are historically the busiest months because that's when people get their tax refund. Now they can actually afford, to go and file bankruptcy. So for me, I think, that's starting to heat up a little bit and it might have an impact, on the real estate market.
The bankruptcies?
Well, just the market in general. I mean, yeah, people can't afford, homes, things like that, foreclosures. I don't know if the foreclosures are heating up yet, but, just debt is at an all-time high. If you look at the statistics, just in general, student loans are a big deal. And there's really no solution for student loans.
Right.
And, people aren't able to go and buy, real estate if they're paying their student loans or trying to. And credit card debt and car loans also are, a big problem.
Right. There is, the last half of 2018 here from June through the end of the year was quite a spanking here in our market for sure in regards to like people who flip houses and stuff. A lot of people lost a lot of money, right? Even probably scared some out of the business to the sense that they reevaluated what they want to do within the real estate industry, right? Because they took some pretty big spankings because they were over leveraged with their hard money and things like that, right? And even if they weren't, I mean, if they bought it in the first part of 2018 at the peak, right? And then it went down 10%. A lot of people lost a lot of money the last 6 months. So I know a lot of my hard money lender friends are getting a lot of calls of investors not being able to pay off. And for those of people who had a second lien position, behind somebody's hard money first, boy, you're in trouble on those deals.
Right.
Got any calls about stuff like that?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, like over the years, when we were starting out, real estate agents, investors, contractors, you name it. I represented a lot of those people. And real estate with agents and, income just varies for people. But I haven't really seen him coming in, recently. I mean, over the years they do come in, but I haven't really noticed an uptick in just that one industry.
Yeah. Well, I think the local hard money lenders are, whether they're having to just, they're probably fine as these people are losing their equity, right? So it's still cleaning up, I think, even from the last half of 2018, at least in the hard money world.
Right. Just going off of that, though, sometimes I do have people who are in those positions, and they might not have to file bankruptcy, or it might not be a good idea, but if the home becomes, if there's not enough equity to pay that second loan, then your negotiating position goes up quite a bit, and you might be able to get a great deal just trying to settle that loan for maybe half of what you owe, something like that.
Exactly. So if any of you listening are in that position, Richard's your guy. You might want to call him for a little consult and see if you can talk through some ideas with him, because I get those calls, because of Seattle Investors Club, and we have a weekly small group mastermind, and you should come sometime, actually. That would be awesome.
Yeah, happy to.
Later. Yeah, that'd be great value add. Yeah, I get people asking me about that stuff. They come and they bring their problems every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. And we try and help them out. But now we'll talk to them for our 2 hours, and then we'll send them over to you. See what you can do.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the less equity, the better in the home. If it's a second mortgage, you could really get maybe 20 cents on the dollar, if that's the case. But banks will ask for maybe an appraisal sometimes and things like that to make sure everything checks out.
Awesome stuff. We'll have to talk about that even more. Maybe we're going to have you on multiple podcasts here. But let's back it up for a second and just so we're going to talk a little bit more about bankruptcy and foreclosure. I even myself, being in real estate for so long, luckily I don't really deal with a lot of people in bankruptcy. And as far as the foreclosure stuff goes, I don't, I think that foreclosure, people that are in pre-foreclosure, like as an investor, obviously Washington State Distressed Homeowners Act, are you versed on that? You're not allowed to go after those people. It happens.
Right.
In town, people do it maybe, but I'm a rule follower. So
yeah, I mean,
you're not supposed to do that. Tell us about your opinion on all that.
Well, I mean, I actually had a deal that ran up against that because my buddy referred me his buddy, and then I ended up helping him stop the foreclosure sale. I made him an offer, but somebody else came in, and and the guy wouldn't leave unless we paid him something before he would leave, and I just didn't want to do that with the law being what it is.
Right.
But somebody did because he got what he wanted. But yeah, I mean, you're always taking a risk. It's just how much risk do you want to take, and is it worth it? Because if, the seller ends up complaining to the state, that could, it's I believe a criminal violation. So
right.
Is it worth it? Probably not, unless you really know the person you're dealing with.
Right. What I do? That's the reason why you all need to have a real estate license, because if you're an investor and you're running into this stuff, you simply you can just broker it. And now, you're a broker instead of an investor, right? Mm-hmm. And you can still make a transaction happen that way. And it's cleaner and it's by the book and all that stuff. So there are so many reasons why people should, if they're investors, need to have a real estate license, right? I think people get confused that they think having a real estate license as an investor is more handcuffing than not to have one. Like you have more freedom without one. But the truth of the matter is, it's the opposite. If you get accused of acting like a broker when you're not one, or you're an investor dealing directly with distressed homeowners, that is some big ass trouble, peeps. A lot bigger trouble than getting hand slapped by the MLS. And honestly, the rules aren't tough. They've actually made pathways so it's not gray area anymore to do off-market transactions, through the MLS. So if you just know what the rules are, it's easy to follow the rules, it's just that people they feel like they don't want to learn the rules, or the rules are too scary. So again, that's my pitch. My mama bear talk to you all on that. You guys hear me say it all the time. But yeah.
Well, I mean, just jumping back into that situation, if you run up against a person who is a distressed homeowner, there's a foreclosure sale coming up. I mean, they got options, and you could help them buy more time so that you could get the deal done. And
well, talk to us about that. Give us an example of that.
So the first thing I would recommend, if this is their only issue, I mean, if they got other debt issues, then we could talk to them more in depth about, bankruptcy options.
Their only issue being pre-foreclosure.
Right. Yeah. So with these people, and if their intent is to actually sell the property, so maybe they don't want to go through an actual bankruptcy, there's something called the Foreclosure Fairness Act. And so if their lender is one of the major banks, smaller banks are exempt from the Foreclosure Fairness Act. But and you have to submit a referral to the state, and it only can be submitted by an attorney or a housing counselor. And the latest that it can be done is 20 days after they receive the foreclosure sale. And so by doing that, they cannot be foreclosed on. So the purpose of it is to get the person a loan modification. But, all they have to do is go through the motions. As long as, the application's in time, then the bank will not be able to foreclose on this property, during this mediation process, which can take months. So if they're just looking to buy more time, that's your best option.
And so that can work both ways, right? So that can work. So from the perspective of an investor, right? Mm-hmm. So now we have Richard on our team, everybody. Okay. Richard is, there you go. Somebody for your team right there. If you know what I'm saying, quote team. It can go, I'm thinking about it both ways, how it's great for an investor or maybe not, right? Mm-hmm. So if an investor has a seller that is willing, but they're, and just need more time, then this is a great idea. But on the flip side, if the seller wants to sort of game the situation and just buy more time, they can do that as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're dealing with people that are in this position for a reason. And so they may just be, trying to hang on, hoping some deal is going to come through, or really they could apply for a loan modification. It's not guaranteed they're going to get it, right? So you could kind of just hang out in the background. If they get it, great. If they don't, I mean, you're there to pick up the deal and make it happen. Because
on that. Like, so they have to file this notice only with major banks through, we'll say Richard, 20 days after they receive.
Well, so the window opens once they receive the notice of default. So that's one of the first. So the first notice that goes out in the foreclosure process is the notice of pre-foreclosure options. And then 30 days after that, a notice of default may be issued by the bank. And so once they do that, that opens the door for an attorney to request the foreclosure fairness mediation. And if nothing's done, then maybe 30 days after that, the notice of trustee sale will be issued. And so they have 20 days at the latest after that to request the foreclosure fairness mediation.
Okay. So, and then let's say they are awarded the foreclosure fairness mediation. How long's that timeline now? Because now they're obviously, if they do that, they probably need to, whether they think they can do it or not, go for the loan modification, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to go through the motions. So once the request is sent to the state, the attorneys for the bank are notified and the trustee, and a mediator will be assigned in the county where the property is or the people live. And so this is only for a primary residence as well. I should say that. The mediator is assigned, and then they'll, have a timeline of events, like when documents are due. And so they'll have to submit, loan modification documents, income, all that stuff, a whole package. And so that might be 30 days after the mediator is assigned, and then they may schedule a mediation 1 or 2 months after that.
Well, first of all, though, somebody's got to, so let's say you get 30 days out, somebody's got to actually be willing to turn in all the information. That's the hard part, getting these people to turn in the information for the loan modification, right?
Correct. If you're looking to buy the most time, but say you only need 30 days, you could, just get it started. If the people don't follow through, the mediation will just basically get tossed out, if the people aren't cooperating.
Right. So as an investor, they do this, let's say they do it. You're looking at what, 60 days maybe before they get tossed out?
Yeah. I mean, that sounds about right. The mediator will give them, every opportunity to submit the documents.
I'm telling my podcast land listeners, like, the follow-up timelines, right? Because I know you guys are all using your CRMs with your tasks that are alerting you for the old FU, if you know what I mean, the old follow-up, right? So this is like a follow-up schedule in this situation is kind of what I'm trying to zero in on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, they could voluntarily withdraw from the mediation at any time. They could just be like, I don't want to be here anymore. And then, I would just let the mediator and opposing counsel know. And the mediator would basically submit something to the state saying everyone acted in good faith. That's what you're looking for. So if they don't get a loan modification and then the sale's rescheduled, they still have an opportunity to stop the sale. And that would be through a Chapter 13 bankruptcy.
Okay.
And so I do this a lot for people, even people who don't intend to file a bankruptcy, but they're just looking to buy more time. And so there's 2 major types of bankruptcy, which is Chapter 7, which wipes out your debt, and trustee can sell assets if they have equity. And so if you have a house with equity, with more than 125,000 of equity, you definitely don't want to be filing Chapter 7.
You also don't want to be going into foreclosure. Yeah. I mean, like, you should just sell your damn house, right?
Right. Yeah. So that would be a terrible mistake, especially if somebody's not represented and they accidentally file the wrong chapter, because the trustees will go after your property even if you did it by mistake.
Hey guys, Joe here. I just want to take this super quick break from the action to let you know something that we have really cool to offer you guys. As you know, marketing is the lifeblood of our real estate business, and Julie and I spend a ton of money sending out postcards and letters to people all around the Seattle area. We've partnered up with YellowLetters.com to get you guys 10% off all of your marketing needs at Yellow Letters. All you have to do is go to YellowLetters.com, and when you check out, use the code Seattle Investors Club, and you'll get 10% off any of your marketing needs at YellowLetters.com. You can send postcards, letters, whatever it may be that YellowLetters.com has, so that you can keep your marketing engine running for a little less money. So go to YellowLetters.com, use the code Seattle Investors Club with no spaces, and get your marketing going today. All right, let's get back to the action.
This is kind of I don't even know if you can even answer this or if you're allowed to answer this. Let's say somebody mistakenly files Chapter 7, and they're whatever the first notice, or I don't know what that would be, you can tell us, but I don't know if that's public record or not, right?
The bankruptcy notice?
The first step in Chapter 7.
The moment you file, it's public record. So that goes on your credit report. And I mean, you can find it at a website called pacer.gov if you just search somebody's name.
Okay. Let me ask you then. So, that's damaging to them because now they've got it on their credit. But if somebody messed up and files Chapter 7, I'm thinking as an investor, right? Mm-hmm. Couldn't I be like researching those public records to see if there is a house associated with somebody somehow? And if I find that they have equity in that house, meaning they made a mistake, then you
could. So for instance, like in King County, there's about 4 or 5 trustees that are in charge of liquidating assets if there's any equity. And so most of them have an agent they're already working with, and they specialize in selling these properties for the trustee. I would think there's not a ton of houses that people are trying to keep that are getting sold by trustees. Usually it's involuntary, but usually, their lawyer would tell them, hey,
Gotcha. Right.
this is a bad idea to file Chapter 7. Let's go Chapter 13.
Okay. Well, tell us again the differences. Chapter 7, boo-boo. Chapter 13.
Chapter 7 wipes out all your debt, essentially, most types of debt. Besides some taxes, child support, student loans, those are not dischargeable. Chapter 13, you're supposed to submit a plan where you repay creditors based on your disposable income, or it could also be based on the value of your assets if they're not what's called exempt. And it's also based on your family size. But Chapter 13, when you file, it starts what's called an automatic stay. And this goes for the same with Chapter 7. So you could file, at 9:59 a.m. and the foreclosure sale's at 10 a.m. and that would stop the foreclosure sale.
Oh.
I don't recommend it, but people do call me on that Thursday, saying they're getting foreclosed on at 10 a.m. on Friday. So, that's, not advisable, but it does happen. So we can file what's called like an emergency bankruptcy. It consists of like a petition with their name, address, social, list of any creditors, and just doing that will stop the sale.
Well, let me ask you. So let's say investors, this happens, right? However you stumble upon a pre-foreclosure, right? Because we know you're all following the rules and you're not like sending them direct mail or anything like that, right, guys? Everybody raise their hand if they know what I'm talking about. Don't do that. So let's say, but it does happen, right? Even if you try not to run into these people, right? You still do. That happens to me, right? And I'm not trying to target anybody. So is there like, I always wondered if there's a certain amount of days before, the auction that, I don't know why I have the idea of 11 days in my head for some reason, that like if you're inside or outside X amount of days, you can basically make them an offer, or however you're going to transact that real estate transaction, broker it, however you guys do it. But is there a number of days before where it's your SOL?
I think that just has to do with how many days the lender will accept, funds to stop the sale before it's scheduled. So they may say, no, we didn't get the funds by a certain day and we're going to move forward with the sale. So from that standpoint, you might be SOL.
Right. And that's lender by lender, probably.
Yeah.
I gotcha. And so what about using the tactic, not that we're encouraging this, but let's say an investor, we're trying to help people too, right? Yes, we want a deal, but it also helps them to maybe get their house sold instead of have it foreclosed. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, yeah. Just because the trustee, if they do sell a house, takes a massive fee, for themselves and whoever lawyer they hire to go, and agents and all of that. So getting the house sold in the bankruptcy process is a, worst case scenario for any seller.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say, though, is if as investors, everybody who's listening, stumbles into the situation that they've got somebody that is being foreclosed upon in the next week or something, it's scheduled. I guess what it would be is it'd be scheduled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they could call you and say, what do we do?
Yep. That's a weekly occurrence for me.
Right.
Getting those types of people like panicking at the last minute.
Do you ever get investors with sellers calling you together? Like, I don't mean like a conference call together, but like, hey,
usually not together. I might get like a seller telling me the situation, or usually it's the seller, but it could be an investor, or I've represented, real estate agents who are dealing with properties and
right.
All kinds of scenarios. Yeah.
Awesome. Got a member of your team here for you guys, right? Are most bankruptcies, are they voluntary or involuntary?
Most all are voluntary. Yeah. I mean, nobody wants to file bankruptcy. Most people want to pay their debts, but yeah, most people end up doing it voluntarily. I've had to deal with a couple involuntary. Maybe somebody started as a Chapter 13, didn't act with what's called good faith. There's rules you have to abide by. It's a federal process, and if they're just not doing what they're supposed to do, the trustee can file a motion in Chapter 13 to force somebody into a 7 to liquidate assets. And that can also happen with, you might have heard of Chapter 11 cases, which are usually big corporate cases or high net worth people. So that might be like a real estate investor might have to do Chapter 11 because there are debt limits in Chapter 13. And so Chapter 11 is really expensive, lots of things debtor has to do in Chapter 11. And so you don't want to be found in bad faith where you get forced into a 7 where they could actually liquidate assets.
Do you have any tips for real estate investors? I mean, you know what we're all about. That would be, we know we can't go after them due to the Washington State Distressed Homeowners Act, right? But any tips for investors on how to, I don't know, have success picking up houses related to your world?
Yeah, I mean, I would. You're obviously going to come across these places, whether you mean to or not, most likely. And so it's really just giving people all their options and letting them know what's out there. Maybe a lot of people just won't file bankruptcy no matter what, right? So they need a quick sale and for it to go through. But if they hear it maybe from an attorney, their options, maybe reality will sink in a little bit more. And what they need to do. Because if somebody calls me and says, hey, should I sell this place or should I file bankruptcy? I would say, well, what's your intent? And this is how you're going to get the most money out of it.
Right. Exactly. This goes back to, my personal philosophy that works wonderful for me is that when I go on appointments, whatever the appointment is, it's a, hammered house all messed up, or if it's a retail appointment, whatever it is, I go in there just simply from a point of providing good service without worrying about what the outcome is, and specialize in providing options. And when I specialize in providing options, right, then there's almost no way that they're going to say no to me if I've served them well and given them options that they can choose from. And you make a really great point in the pre-foreclosure situation that we're inevitably going to run across from time to time, that instead of going in there and thinking of this person as I'm going to, grab their house before they go into foreclosure, you go in more with the service mentality, and you offer up something like a conversation and a consult with Richard as part of the process to have them decide what the best option is for them. Maybe it will be to delay, but like I find that most people, for example, one of the things I do with, here's a big tip for you guys, when I'm dealing with landlords, you get the call, oh, I'm tired of being a landlord, or I'm, I got a rental property, I want to sell it and stuff like that. Okay, so I go on the appointment. The very first thing I do when I walk in the door is I say, why are you selling? Like, is there a way you should keep it? I basically go in the house and I say, don't sell the house. You have a house with a Seattle address or wherever it is, and just because you don't like being a landlord, there are other solutions. Like I can introduce you to my property manager. And so when the first thing I say is, you shouldn't sell the house, well, 90% of the time they're going to sell the house anyways. But now all of a sudden, I have come at it as not somebody that's coming in there to make money off them. And that is an instant rapport building kind of reverse psychology thing that works wonderful, right? Whether I end up getting to buy it or list it, I don't care. It's the same mentality as what I'm saying when you come across pre-foreclosure. Those are squirrely deals to really wrangle down, I find. Like I don't even like dealing with them because I think it's funny how savvy a lot of these people that are in pre-foreclosure are, right? And especially on the investor side of that, I like the approach of going in, not like looking for a deal, but walking in the door with a point of service. Like, how can we help this people get out of the situation? One of the options might be that I buy the house, but let me provide them with all their options. I don't want to just go in there and try and buy their house or broker their house. You just provided us this conversation is basically putting another lens on us when we're dealing with these people to walk in and use Richard, guys, as one of your options, right? To provide good service. Now that's rapport building. So when it does pop out the other side later, 60 days later or however later, you've provided that service and you can probably keep your foot in the door as compared to the other people that are door knocking. I did a transaction on a pre-foreclosure house back, I'd say end of last year. And while I was there and we were doing the contract and all the paperwork, there were other investors freaking at the door knocking. I was there while it was door knocked by some other investor. It was hilarious. Right?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, I get calls all the time. Maybe they've already hired me to do the bankruptcy and they're like, why are these people on my front lawn taking pictures? They're still bothering me, so you got to put yourself in their mindset and they're, scared. What do I do? And it may not be realistic that they're going to keep the property, right? Because in Chapter 13, in order for that to be successful, they would have to make up their payments that they're behind over a 60-month period. And so if something's happening to their income where they just can't do it, then selling's their best option.
Yeah, but they're not going to say yes to I know that they do because I know there's groups in town that have success with that model, whatever, but that's not how I roll. And that's not how I want to teach my tribe, hopefully, everybody that's listening, how to roll. I would prefer to go in with the options and do what's best for them. Then I'm in there, and if it's good for them to sell me the house or whatever's going to happen or broker it, so be it.
Exactly.
Because I want to sleep at night and I want to play by the rules. So if you guys want to be in my tribe, that's how I roll. And Richard is now my friend is your friend. There you go. Awesome stuff. I love it. Right there. Boom. Mike. I feel like that's a mic drop moment, guys. Just the perspective that you were just given. Anyways, how long does the bankruptcy stay on your credit? And are you familiar with, after what I think, you can get maybe better loan terms, just like even 2 years after your discharge on a Chapter 7 or something. What's the insight?
So obviously talk to your mortgage broker, but I believe it's 2 years after you file a 7 that you would qualify for most federal loans. And to be honest, if somebody files bankruptcy and they have bad credit, bankruptcy pretty much clears up everything and most people's credit scores improve. A lot of times over 100 points because their credit score is so low anyways. Now the bankruptcy will still be there just as a public record, but a lot of the other negative items like from credit cards, medical, whatnot go away. And they can start rebuilding their credit right away. People are offered car loans, credit right after filing a lot of the times. And so the Chapter 7 process takes about 90 days and then you're done. Versus Chapter 13, I've been told by some banks, the moment somebody gets out of Chapter 13, so that's either going to be a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan, and that's if they've actually filed bankruptcy for real, going through the whole plan and everything, then they would be able to qualify for a home loan pretty much right away. So, but that one would remain on the credit. I believe it's still 10 years. It could be 7.
Interesting. Good stuff. Do you ever work with real estate investors that are going bankrupt or?
Sometimes I get emails from some of them. Hey, I'm trying to buy this guy's house. Can you help me out? But that's up to the trustee really. Sometimes with the Chapter 13s that happens if they know it's like a emergency filing and the person doesn't really intend to go through with the bankruptcy process. They're just filing just to buy some time. I do get some of those. But usually the person already has a plan in place. So I don't recommend just emailing the bankruptcy attorney. That doesn't really help.
Yeah. Well, let's jump over to foreclosures now for a minute. Kind of part two here. Lay it as layman's terms to go back to the basics. I don't know. Does the timelines for foreclosures, have they changed at all? Like the process or the timelines in the last few years, or has it been the same?
It should be the same. Yeah. Should take like a max, or the minimum time would be 180 days from the first letter that goes out to, actually doing the sale.
Can you walk us through that for a minute?
Okay. So I think we talked about this a little bit before, but the first letter would be the notice of pre-foreclosure options. So that could be sent out any day after 30 days late.
Okay.
But usually, the banks are slow, so it could be a lot longer than that, but that's the first step in the process. And then the minimum 30 days after that would be the notice of default, which opens the door to the Foreclosure Fairness Act if they want to do that. And then minimum 30 days after that would be the notice of trustee sale. And then that it will list the actual scheduled foreclosure date. And so depending on when they've scheduled it, that could be usually 60 days out from there. And then, if you don't do anything, it gets foreclosed.
Right. What happens? What are the reasons why the foreclosure auction gets called off? Is it because they make some partial payment, or what do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, if somebody's really trying to save the house, a lot of times if you submit a loan modification application, they may postpone the sale. Although my experience is they don't. But yeah, so if anyone's trying to keep the house, I say submit a loan modification application with all the proper documents. Usually people don't do this right. They're missing pay stubs or bank statements, and they end up going in circles with the bank because every document, every checkbox has to be exact, or they'll send it back and say, nope, we're not going to review it.
Right.
But usually that would be my first line of defense. And then the Foreclosure Fairness Act, and then the bankruptcy if they need it, unless they need to file bankruptcy for another reason. That might make sense as well. Or they just don't want to deal with everything, and they're just looking to make up their payments over 60 months, and they can afford it.
Sounds good. What is judicial versus non-judicial foreclosure mean, and which one is Washington?
So most of the foreclosures in Washington are non-judicial. And so that goes through the process I just explained, meaning they don't actually have to go to court to go through the foreclosure process. Sometimes you'll see like a sheriff sale as well. Usually I see a lot of HOAs doing sheriff sales on people. Those are the ones that come with usually like a 1-year redemption period. Trustee or sheriff sales are posted on the sheriff's website if you want to look at those properties, but a lot of those are stopped, or people can make up the payments because they're usually smaller amounts.
Have you heard? Isn't Oregon a judicial state? They have the redemption thing there. Do you know?
I don't know. I never researched Oregon.
I've heard of people that investors go buy out the redemption rights.
Yeah, I mean, it could be because when you go to those auctions, like at a sheriff's sale, whoever owns, I guess, the right to get the property, but then you got to wait a year. So I don't know if that's worth it if somebody comes back and redeems the property.
No, you're paying them. You pay them for their right to redeem. Like you buy them off, I guess is the
I
best.
see.
Yeah. Right. So then the year goes away because I don't know how the paperwork I don't really know how that works, but I'm sure some of you guys listening do.
I was just going to get back to your question. So that's the non-judicial, and judicial meaning they file a lawsuit to foreclose. And so certain property has to go through a judicial, like I believe if it's like farm property, has to go through a judicial foreclosure, meaning they file a summons and complaint. The people have a chance to respond and fight them in court. But if no response, then there's just a default judgment for foreclosure.
Got it. But Washington, typically non-judicial.
Yeah, it's probably over 90% is non-judicial.
Okay. So when you see, I'm just curious, is there any common theme on reasons why you see homeowners get in pre-foreclosure? Do you find there's any common thread, such as it leans one way, like they inherited the property and they just don't pay the bills, or they, I don't know, lose a job, or is there any common thread that you find is more the reason?
I mean, not really. Divorce house is common. Business, hasn't done good. Being self-employed, hasn't done good. Medical is a big one. So it's really across the board
Right.
why somebody would fall behind. Again, nobody wants to, but stuff just happens with, the household income where they just can't afford the payments.
I just thought of something, Richard, and I'm just talking here. If any of you, if the, saying something wrong police are listening, this is just a question. So let's say somebody's behind. This is just my business strategy head putting two things together here. If somebody was behind on their mortgage, and let's say they're behind, it's funny. Sometimes I come across people and they're only behind like $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
All this equity in their house, right?
Yep.
Okay. So that's a shame, right? That's crazy. Obviously most investors would be like, well, I'm going to buy that house, right? They're behind. They'd go after it, right? As a greedy investor mindset. What do you think? Is this even, I'm just making this up, guys, as I'm talking here to Richard. You guys just happen to be listening. I'm into like lending money, right? So is there any way that you could figure that, let's say somebody was behind like 15 grand and yes, I want to buy their house, but thinking of it from a service standpoint, and they have equity. So instead of buying their house, I lent them their 15 or 20 grand plus interest, and then either me or somebody I know, and then that stalled them because now they're back whole again, right? The problem is, I guess then you'd want them to sell the house, right, to get your money back or something like that. Do you get what I'm saying? Do you see where I'm going here with this?
I think you might be running up against maybe predatory lending laws if
Okay.
you know somebody's in pre-foreclosure, because that's a common problem. People are like, yes, I have all this equity, but nobody will give me a loan. Like that happens quite a bit. And yeah, it could be only like $15,000, but nobody will give them a loan because their credit's shot, and maybe they're not generating the income they need to pay on a regular basis. So I suppose you could give them a loan, put a lien on the property, but then trying to foreclose, there might be some sort of predatory lending.
No, I don't want to foreclose after that. I just want to let's say have it listed for sale.
If that's due, just to buy more time.
The question is, just because they have so much equity in the house, right? The question is, I don't even know what I'm talking about here. I'm thinking of all these lending ideas. That's like my new, top of mind topic lately. So I won't get too sidetracked down this rabbit hole with you today, but I may have some other questions for you there.
I would just watch out for the predatory lending. I haven't done the research.
I totally get what you're saying, right? And that's not my intention.
And if you did, it would have to be no more than 12%, because that's what the usury laws of interest in Washington.
Okay. All right. So if I'm a real estate broker, let's say, and or let's say my friend's a real estate broker and they're listing a house for sale, that person needed to put a roof on their house and they didn't have any money, right? Because let's say the roof needs to go on in order to make it financeable by the bank or something, right? And I made them a private loan, right? This is my friend has a listing and I made that their seller a private loan of 10 grand to get their roof put on. However I secure it or whatever, I'm going to skip all that part, right? I charge them interest. I lent them 10 grand. I asked them to pay me back 11. Does it have to stay within 12%, or is that like a no-no, what I'm even talking about?
Well, I just know this because I had a case that ran up against it in the bankruptcy court. So they tried to throw the whole loan out because it was charging more than 12%.
Okay.
So I would keep it within 12%. But it sounds like something that you could do. You know,
I
yeah,
got you.
yeah.
I hear what you're saying. Okay. I might pick your brain later more about that. But I find that a very interesting, something interesting there, right? As far as I'm concerned. But anyways, all trying to do this with the right intentions, guys, as I'm asking these questions. Let's see. Let me see if I have anything else to ask you as we wind up here. Which debts on bankruptcy and stuff can be wiped out and which can't?
Well, the most common that can be wiped out: medical, credit cards. If you've had a business, done, restaurant, dental practice, whatever, people get loans. It could even be a car you don't want. You could return that. Repossessions. So those things can usually go away. Stuff that can't would be child support. It could be marital debt in Chapter 7. However, if the marital debt is not for their support, then it can be wiped out in Chapter 13. So if they owed money from like legal fees or something, or credit card debt, that would go away in Chapter 13 if it was associated with a divorce, but not in Chapter 7.
How about tax implications on it?
Yeah. So the tax rule is that you can, well, first of all, like B&O tax, local taxes are usually not dischargeable if they're like owed to the state for that sort of thing. But IRS tax debt usually is dischargeable if it's older than 3 years from the date the taxes were due. So like if you filed an extension, or the dates were told for some reason, that would come into play. But let's just say it's April 15th is when taxes are due. So then you would have to wait 3 years from that date for that year for them to be dischargeable. And then on top of that, you have to have filed those tax returns at least 2 years ago. And they have to not have been reassessed. I believe it's in the last 180 days, whatever that means. So okay. Usually, if they meet those requirements, they can get out of the taxes.
Awesome stuff. All good stuff today. I could go on and on and on, guys, but I've just realized that I'm starving. I don't know about you guys, but I am starving. This is also just been awesome stuff today. We're going to talk to you more. We'd love to plug you into our whole world as a resource. Everybody needs a guy like Richard on their team, or a gal. How can people reach you if don't bombard him with stupid shit, guys, but if you have a legit reason to contact Richard, how would you like them to do that? And can you tell us what your website is where they can find all the awesome information about you and your practice areas?
Yeah, so website is going to be bankruptcy-law-seattle.com. They can contact me at 206-682-7975 or shoot me an email, richard@symmmeslaw.com.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Joe, anything you want to add, or where can they find all the details today of this podcast?
Yeah, that was awesome, guys. You can get all of the show notes. I was taking a lot of them as fast as I could at seattleinvestorsclub.com/72. That's seattleinvestorsclub.com/72. And if you like this podcast or any of the other ones we've done, we'd love a review on iTunes or wherever you are listening to this podcast. And last but not least, it is free to subscribe. So if you like this, like our podcast, hit subscribe.
And as a little admin note for you guys, I want to remind you all that you can come join me every Tuesday from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. in Burien at the Elliott Bay Brew House and Pub for our small group roundtable coaching mastermind. It is awesome, spectacularly awesome. All the nuggets and helpfulness and deals. I think we had 2 people last week even partner up. We had deals getting sold. Aside from that, it is bring all your questions, bring all your deals, bring anything you want. It is turned out to be probably the best decision we've ever made, is to do that little small group roundtable coaching thing. So, and for all of you real estate brokers or anybody else out there, investors who are thinking about getting their real estate license, I would love to talk to you and give you some ninja stuff to think about. You can reach out to me at julie@seattleinvestorsclub.com, or better yet, just come see me on Tuesday. And Richard, I hope maybe sometime you pop by on a Tuesday. Might be fun.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and I'll even buy you lunch. How about that?
Nice. Okay, sold.
All right. Well, that's all I got for today, guys. And thank you both, Richard, Joe. I'll see you guys on the backside here, and over and out.
See you later.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Seattle Investors Club podcast. If you have questions that you'd like to have answered on the show, shoot us an email at info@seattleinvestorsclub.com. Now go out, take that action, and build that real estate business. Thanks for listening.